Hey everyone, thanks for coming back to the LawyerVid channel. Your support is very much appreciated. If you're interested in the LawyerVid platform, please visit lawyervid.com. And if you're an attorney, definitely visit lawyervid.com, sign up, create a profile, and make yourself available for online video consultations to members of the general public throughout all 50 states. Now, as I stated in a previous video, and when I created the LawyerVid platform, I did it with two things in mind. First, is to make attorneys more accessible to members of the general public, which I figured that there was no better way than to have a centralized database where attorneys can be searched for based on their state and practice area, and then all the profiles would pop up, and then the individual seeking legal representation would be able to pick and choose who is most suitable for him and immediately schedule an online video consultation through the platform. For attorneys, we're trying to grow our business. We're trying to get more people to sign up and retain our services and make it so we can help them fulfill their legal needs. So in any event, we look forward to seeing you sign up for the profile and use the profile. We are sincerely devoted toward making it a successful method for attorneys and clients alike to connect and to accomplish their goals. Now, as I said before, too, the LawyerVid channel is not specifically just to talk about the LawyerVid platform. That's obviously a piece of it. But the LawyerVid channel itself is more or less a channel for entertainment. And like I said before, I've been fortunate to have been involved in many practice areas: criminal defense, personal injury, civil litigation, business incorporation. I've represented individuals. I've represented businesses. I've done a wide array of different things in my law practice. I've been very fortunate to. What I do notice is that a lot of the people that are watching videos on either YouTube or on television, whatever media platform they may be watching videos, there is a particular interest in true crime. And that's probably because it encompasses a whole number of different things such as human behavior, police investigation, things of that nature. So, like I said before, I feel fortunate that when I first started my law practice, I was working with a law firm that focused primarily on criminal defense. Essentially, I was in court one day. I was very new. I was only out of law school for a couple years, and I had filed a motion, and I was trying to get a gun case dismissed for my client. And while I was making the argument in court, there was another individual, a much more seasoned attorney, that saw me litigating, and he was impressed with my ability and impressed with the judge's reaction and the arguments that I was making. So we had gotten talking in court, and we went out to lunch, and then I eventually went to his office, and I met his senior partner, and that relationship spanned 5 years, where I was working as a quasi-associate for this law firm that practiced primarily in criminal defense. So one of the interesting things that happened was I had an opportunity as a relatively very young attorney to work on a murder case. I was about 4 or 5 years out of law school, and this case was setting for trial, and I was part of it. So in any event, that's something I wanted to talk about in this video, because I think it's something that you might find interesting. Like I said, it involves true crime. There's a whole bunch to it, and a whole bunch of things that happened in this particular case that I found particularly interesting. So getting a little bit into the facts of the case, it was a gang shooting. Essentially, what happened was the individual he was a gang member. He was a Four Corner hustler. And I'm pretty sure the history of that, it's a Chicago street gang. And he had a beef one way or another, and for one reason or another, who knows. It was probably over nothing substantial enough, I would assume, to not, be cause of a murder. But there was a beef between these two individuals, and one day while the defendant, our client, was with his girlfriend. He was driving, and then suddenly, all of a sudden, boom, 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 3 shots fired through the back windshield of his vehicle. And fortunately, him and his girlfriend were able to get away. But, time went on, and he was able to find out who the individual was that was responsible for shooting up his car. And, it was not long after that. It was like a couple weeks later. He was out. They were out at a club. They were partying. And our client had seen the individual that was responsible for shooting up his vehicle. They had bumped into one another at the club, and there was like a couple words exchanged, nothing big, no fight or anything that happened in the club. But our client, he left. And then what ended up happening was the person who had shot up my client's car, he was with a group of people, he walked out of the club, and then all of a sudden, our client and another individual that our client was with just started unloading on him, the entire group. Just, boom, 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 boom. I, from what I recall in testimony, it was probably like 30 or 40 shots that were fired. And the person that our client was targeting actually did get killed. But the people that were with him, they all got shot. There were 6 people that got shot. 5 of them lived. And then the target who he was trying to kill actually did in fact get killed. So the charge was first-degree murder, along with attempted murder on the other 5. So what was interesting, though, about this trial, and this is just sort of the reason I tell this story, it's not just so much about the egregious nature of, and the violence of what happened, but it's about the reality of what sometimes happens at trial in a gangland case, or a case like this, where it involves a shooting. Because the shooting wasn't even necessarily gang-related. It was just a beef between 2 individuals, and it just wound up in bloodshed. But what ended up happening, which was kind of an interesting thing, was the police, they eventually apprehend the defendant. And one funny thing about it was, in the video where they spoke to him for an hour and a half, 2 hours, he says a whole bunch of different stuff, which basically incriminates himself and implicates himself as being the shooter. But it wasn't direct. But it was just kind of funny that the state, during the trial, they never used any of the statements that he made to the police as a basis of their argument that he was in fact involved. So I just thought it was funny. For instance, he told the police at one point, "Man, I wish this happened 15, 20 years because it would be like a 10 or a 15-year sentence," which, he doesn't directly admit to being involved in the shooting, but a statement like that could certainly be construed as, I wish I had done this earlier because I wouldn't have to worry about such a long sentence. So I just thought that was interesting that the state never used any portion of this video in their prosecution, which made me believe that, the detectives who made the video, they probably just wrote in the report that the defendant didn't make any incriminating statements. And then when they gave it to the state's attorney saw that, and they probably just didn't even watch the video, So had they watched the video, they might have been like, oh, we should definitely probably use that to show that he ultimately, admitted it without admitting it. It was just a very funny thing that was worth noting. But in any event, some of the reality about some of these types of shootings that I found interesting was this. So obviously they needed a witness Okay, there was the person who was killed. He obviously can't testify. But there were 5 other people that got shot. So they were able to testify. And at trial, they all flipped what they had originally stated to the police and to the ambulance and everybody else that they had given a statement to. So, for instance, after the police questioned one of the people that got shot, he stated that it was the defendant. Another individual that got shot stated it was the defendant. In fact, there was a woman who had testified in front of a grand jury and stated that it was the defendant. However, when it came time for trial, upon the questioning, who shot you? Don't remember. That was their answer. I don't remember. Even though they had made previous statements that it was the defendant that had shot them. Every single one of them flipped. So I found that very interesting because it showed the reality about how sometimes a person can be clearly guilty in terms of, what they had done. But if you have witnesses that are unwilling to come forward or unable to testify or won't testify, they could potentially get away with it just on those facts alone. And one thing that was funny, one particular instance and thing that happened that was funny was one of the witnesses that got shot, he kept saying, don't remember, to every single question that the state's attorney was asking. Don't remember. And one time, the state's attorney, he started to ask a question, and the witness said, don't remember. And the state's attorney said, sir, please let me just finish my question before you say you don't remember. It was hilarious how the whole thing played out. So another interesting thing about this fact, though, was when you have a situation like this where you got a bunch of people that got shot and a bunch of people tell the police and tell the grand jury that they know specifically the identity of the person who shot them, and they flip their testimony at trial, that could result in an acquittal just on that fact alone. Now, in this case, I remember in the closing argument from the state's attorney, which I thought it was a very creative closing argument, because she stated that when all of these individuals that flipped their testimony and all of a sudden said, oh yeah, we don't remember who shot us, she stated that that was their version, their form of apologizing for being rats. Because, at the time, they told the cops, yeah, it was him. Or they told the ambulance it was him. They told the grand jury it was him. But then later at trial, they say they don't remember, which, again, the state's attorney said that's their version of saying, we're sorry, we told. And so now at trial, we're going to say we don't remember. In this case, what ended up happening was it was a hung jury. They weren't able to seek and obtain a conviction on all of that flipped testimony. It was 10-2. So 10 people that were on the jury were in favor of a conviction, and 2 were in favor of an acquittal. And the jury was unable to come to a unanimous decision. So the case, it was a mistrial. Within about 6 months, the state decided that they were going to retry. And funny enough, at this time, all of those individuals that were, that previously flipped their testimony and stuff, they were all in shackles now because, they'd been arrested from the time that they had testified, from the time of the new trial. They're all in shackles, and some of them have done more dirt. They got arrested for other things. And then at the second trial, that's when they all started to say, yeah, we lied. We were shot by the defendant. And then that defendant was eventually convicted. But, at that point, it probably got to that point where, they were in shackles and they were arrested on new charges and everything else. And it wouldn't surprise me if the state's attorney had told them at that point, listen, if you lie again at this trial and you say you don't remember, we're going to go for the max on this new case that you picked up. So then all of a sudden that changes everybody's mind. They don't care anymore about being a rat. So I thought that was just an interesting, it was an interesting first murder trial for me to handle. And it's also kind of informative about what can happen if you have uncooperative witnesses and you're trying to seek a conviction in a case for a state's attorney. But regardless, was very happy to get that experience, and I hope that you enjoyed this video, and I hope that you continue to subscribe and watch my content. Thank you.